going to be using a palette knife.
And tools.
Yep. And she began a career in design, received a degree from visual arts / illustration from UMass Dartmouth. Since 2000, she's transitioned into oil painting and has studied at the de Cordova Danforth Museum School. She's been at the Medicine Wheel Studio and Mass Art continuing education. And she's also gone on 2 painting retreats in Italy. That was fantastic.
That was wonderful. I'm due to go again.
She's got paintings throughout the United States, is currently represented at the Gallery Twist in Lexington, and her studio is located in downtown Hudson in the old Oddfellows building on 14 Main Street. And if you got our newsletter, and I hope some of you, and if you haven't, check out her website. So, Jane?
Okay, thank you. So, I was trying to figure out the best way. I've always only loved working in oils. That's, I've tried other things, but when I began painting after my career in design, which is where I began, I've always wanted to be a painter. So I started with the oils. I love color, I love to layer. I would typically have like 3 or 4 paintings that I'd be working on simultaneously, so that when one dries, then I can hop on and do another layer, and hop on and do another layer. And it was I had sort of a system. But I had tried encaustic painting, which is where you actually heat the oils and the wax. But it's not really, it's kind of a health hazard to work in that. So I found cold wax. And it's basically just a medium that, there's 2 different brands that I use, but this is kind of my favorite, which is the Gamblin. And it is made primarily of beeswax and some solvents. And so what it does with the oils is, oils take a very long time to dry. When you add the cold wax into the oils, it speeds the dry time. It tends to make the oils dry matte instead of glossy. And it allows me to build layers quite quickly because it creates a barrier between the colors. The wax and the solvents create a barrier. So I'm trying to think, it was about probably 5 years ago when COVID hit. I had my studio and I would go in there and I would just like try everything under the sun on what to do with this stuff, with this, medium. And I used the solvents that I use is Gansol. It's an odorless way to dilute it. And you can create different things with this texture. You can make it thick and matte. You can thin it down so it almost looks watercolorish. You can do everything in between. I have
the wax you're talking about?
When you mix the wax with the oils.
Okay.
I've always loved pattern and texture, and I'm definitely, nature has been my muse. I love being out in nature. I love flowers and, just trees and everything, birds. So when I started with this, I found a lot of tools that have kind of patterns that to me replicate sort of forms found in nature, and I use them a lot in addition to straight palette knife work. I have here one of my finished paintings that I brought just to show when you, after we're done here, you can look. There are a lot of little textures underneath like a color that to me kind of emulate grass or leaves, or I like to play around with not making things realistic in a lot of ways. I kind of have a very stylized look at things. I like to keep things simple, but yet complex in that there are a lot of layers and so forth. So typically there are three surfaces I like to work on. And one of them is this cradled wood board. And when I work on the wax with this, I tend to get very thick with the wax because it's rigid. This is Arches oil paper, which is here, which I use a lot when I'm experimenting and practicing. It's a great surface. It's very durable, and I can really work it and scrape it because I use a lot of layers, taking on, taking off, etc. And then the other favorite is the linen, the oil prime linen. I like that because it kind of has a lot of give, and it works well with the knives that I use. I don't tend to get as thick with the actual texture, but there's still a lot of layering. So I'm hoping everybody can hear me okay. Okay. I kind of have a soft voice sort of, but I'm trying to be a little bit loud. Going. So what I found when I'm working with this is it tends to be a little messy initially, and then as I work on it, I get more and more refined with what I'm doing. But so typically what I do is, this is the cold wax. It's kind of the consistency of soft butter, and I just drop some in my glass. Kind of like frosting, you know. And then the way that I start, and this is just my technique that I find works for me. One of my favorite colors is indigo. It's a very dense, deep blue. And so I start off with an indigo base, which to me, as I'm working on the colors and building the layers, it creates kind of a unified surface that sometimes it peeks through and sometimes I cover it up. But it just kind of unifies things, and I love creating edges, which is another reason why I like the indigo, because it's very dark and dense. Look, it kind of reads as black. So I'm just going to take a bunch of indigo.
You're working on glass, is that right now?
Yeah, I usually, when I mix colors, when I get more like, if I was going to work on this one too, and I'll mix some colors. For that, I like to work on the glass because I use rollers, and I need the surface area, and it's easier to clean up.
Would plexiglass work as well?
No, it would scratch more, I think. This is kind of like, what if I had an old entertainment system that had, you know, tempered glass shelves.
Yeah.
And they're perfect. You know, they're heavy, but they work really well. So, all right, so then all I do is I basically take, when I'm starting out, I'll do like probably almost like the same amount of oil to wax. And that's the other thing, you can change the ratios based on what you want to do. But right here what I'm doing is I'm just kind of creating a thick paste. And you can see how thick it is. It's really, and then if I want to thin it out, this is the Gamsol. Yes, but it's odorless and it's much better than turpentine. It doesn't smell in the studio as much. So I'm just kind of showing you the thickness and the thinness that you can get with this. And what I do when I, oftentimes, because as I said, I like edges, is I'll do it very thin, and I'll use actually the edge of the palette knife, and you can actually, like, you know, create interesting lines. But for right now, I'm going to just go right over this. These tools are my favorite. I just was introduced to this little mini one, but I always use this one. They're Messermeister. They're actually used for pastry, but they're perfect for this. So, you know, basically, I'm just creating a coat of glue wood. And I usually do the edges and all that, but I'm not going to get too particular tonight at time.
Now, did you have to do anything to the wood before you put the paint on?
No, you know, because like sometimes I will do a thin coat of the wax first, but there's a lot of wax in the oil, so you don't really need to. Again, this is the Gamsol still, it's in a spray bottle.
What's the longevity of that type of
Oh, what?
the longevity? I mean, will that last over years or crack? Years. Solutions and stuff.
It will last forever. Well, a lifetime for sure. You know, I mean, it doesn't, that's the thing about, you know, I try to keep building, like, you know, there's all these rules when you use straight oils where, you know, you lean over fat, fat over lean, whatever, but with the wax, when you add the wax to the oils, you can add a lot of wax or a little bit of wax, and it's all wax and oil, so it all just kind of chemically works together, and it doesn't crack. I haven't had any trouble. So hopefully, it's very durable. It actually can dry. It takes a long time to dry, but it can dry to a very hard. It's very hard, and then you can actually, I've tried this. You take a buffer, and you can go over it. You can kind of create this beautiful sheen in the oils as well. So it's extremely durable. Okay. So the purpose of this is I just kind of, you know, make like this coating of indigo. And then I start thinking about what is it that I want to convey. And what got me, I think the last 4 years, have you been to for Julian's? I drive by there to my studio, and when they have their wildflower hill, I stop, choose certain ones, come back to the studio, arrange them, photograph them, you know, and I have hundreds of photographs of wildflowers that I've picked from there. But, so I will typically, like this was a bud that I saw for Julian's, and I was like, oh, I've never seen that before. And then the next day I came into my studio and it was like that. So I was like, oh, you know, it's just like, they're amazing if you know, look at all of the shapes. Nature is just amazing. So I have all these photographs and I recall picking them. Sunny day, I mean, I love being out there. And then I just kind of say, okay, what do I want to do on this canvas here? And so I might just say, at first, I'll say to myself, well, I don't know, where do I want to have the, you know, horizon? And then maybe some water. Okay, and then I might say, you know, I tried drips. I'd maybe do some water down here, so I'm just gonna add some of these Ganisol drips and let that set in and what happens. And then maybe the drips will become flowers. And then this guy, maybe I'll add some Ganisol drops, let that set in there.
Jane, what are the drops doing?
The drops are, I will show you in a sec. Let me, if I can do it this way. Again, it's like, there's a certain amount of time that I'll typically wait before doing this, but I'll just show you. It takes off in irregular shapes part of the blue that then reveals something different that I may or may not turn into something. It's kind of this is the part of the process that I really love because it's, I don't know really always what's going to happen. And it basically takes up in the sky here. It just kind of takes up part of the color. And I may say, I want to keep that, or I want to take it out, or this is where it really needs to kind of sit a little bit longer to absorb into the wood, but you can see it starts to happen. And then the other thing is I have all these pattern things that I use. And I only brought a couple, but they're these sort of wooden flower-like shapes, wooden carved round tools, and I have a lot of these. Again, these are pastry things. And I think that if I had first put a coat of the wax, it might have not sunk in as much and would have been easier for you to. And the longer it sits in, the more it will absorb in and create yet another shape that might become a bush, or might become a bird, or might become a flower, or whatever. So, for a minute. And then the other thing that I do with these is I create a thick mat, which I need a little more. I usually put like a thick coating on here. And then I say, okay, what do I want this to be? Where's this texture going to be? I'm going to this might become grass.
Well, it's been carved.
It is, it's laser carved. Yeah. So different rollers give you different type of textures and techniques. So let's see, let me go this way. And I know it's probably, you can't really see what I'm doing, but can you see the texture? It's just, what it does is it sort of raises, creates a texture that one, you go over it with another color, then you can scrape away, and it's very interesting what happens, what's revealed. You don't always know what is going to be revealed, but when I'm doing, like, for instance, that kind of a piece, in the background, in the green areas, I did a lot of this, and then I'll take color and build, and then scrape away, and just sort of, the composition evolves as I work on it. Okay, so now let's try this. Now, what I'm going to do is start to break out the shapes. So I'm going to think about the sky and the landscape horizon line. And here I'm not overly fussy because this is to me all underpainting. I get very fussy with my colors as I go on. I spend a lot of time mixing particular colors that I feel will enhance what it is I'm trying to convey. So let me just go ahead. Bolton green, French ultramarine. Again, I'm going to add this. And I usually only mix as much as I need for any particular given color, because if I mix too much ahead of time with the wax in it, it does dry quickly.
If it starts to dry, can you bring it back by spritzing it a little? Or is it,
It won't dry in a work session,
okay,
for the most part.
okay.
It's more like overnight, because I would usually, I'd mix colors, a whole bunch of pools of colors, and come back the next day, and I was fine. But if I mix wax in with it, then it's harder to use. But yes, you can soften it again by adding drops of Gamsol. So now I have kind of a horizon line with the sky color as a base. And I'm going to show you what I do oftentimes just to kind of, I'll take some white and more wax. Think of those clouds. So we have just a little bit of wax white, thinking, okay, I'm going to try some clouds. I'm going to take my tool here. You know, it's just,
So it doesn't really mix the layer under it.
no, because I'm not applying a lot of pressure either. Like if I wanted to mix it, I could apply more pressure. But I'm just like trying to give myself the impression of clouds and blue sky for right now. And then, let's see. These are rubber tip tools, and I have a feeling it's, we'll try it. I really should have put a coat of wax underneath, because then the indigo wouldn't have sunk in and I could do more linear work, but I didn't, so. All right, so now, you know, I look at this and I say, hard to see, but I created an outline of the flower that I want, and then I'm just going to say, okay, I want the stem to be this. Because every single mark I make stays there. It builds in the piece. So that when I go over it with other colors, it will reveal itself even more. And so, you know, whether it's a thick application like this I did, or a linear thing, it all stays there in some way, shape, or form. So I think I'm going to do a bud, because I like this bud. And stick this there. depth to the texture in the base of the bud. So I can then go in. Use this. This is nothing, a metal knitting needle. It's a great tool to draw with. So, I just like that. I find that intriguing, that pattern, so I'm just kind of doing a scribble with that kind of feeling of that texture. Again, when I go back over it with like a light color, then it will really show up in terms of a nice texture. So now I'm going to do similar way. So, let's see. We're going to take this one. So I've defined, took this flower, I defined the shape, and now some of the heavier texture that I did for the grass is in there, so I'm just going to kind of smooth it out so that when I go over it with another color, I don't really want the texture there, so I'm taking that out.
Now, is this the stage where you actually are making a composition?
Yes.
You're starting to do a final painting?
Yes, I start to, that's why I start by, defining the land, defining the sky, defining sort of the landscape shapes, and then I take what flowers are speaking to me today. I draw those in, create the composition, so that it starts to evolve that way.
So you never had a preconception of what you're going to do?
Not when I work like this,
Okay.
ever. And that's why I like to work this way. I have no idea what I'm going to do.
Okay.
And, you know, it's different than like going out and plein air painting and, you know, looking at a certain view and replicating it in your vision, as opposed to what I like to do is take all that I've experienced and know and love about nature and just create something that makes me feel joyful.
Yeah,
And I do that with, you know, through the flowers, the shapes, the color palettes that I use, and it's yeah, it involves. And, you know, like, it's harder to see, but there's a lot of interesting shapes when I have dripped, which will probably become part of the end product, because I like it. Maybe I'll just do a couple more. And let those sit for a little bit. The other thing that I like to, you can see it's messy. It's messy. Okay. I have these, these are smooth brayers, you know, used for printing and whatever, that I use a lot as well. And I'm going to coat this. And I'm going to take my, scrape some on. And then I'm going to say to myself, I want a little tree line, a triangle tree line. Again, I wouldn't normally do it on top of here because it's too wet. So it's sort of mushed a little bit here, but you can get the idea of what happens. So it kind of like creates yet another texture, another layer, and then I can go back in. And it's constantly this, you know, push and pull and tug of war with what do I want to keep, what do I want to stay, looking at negatives, looking at positives, you know, positive shapes. And it's a lot of fun for me to do it this way, to work this way. No, that one I did differently.
Oh,
I have
okay.
all different ways that I do that, and that way I had done with this,
Oh.
with actually cutting in. This one I did, this was kind of the opposite. I always start usually with the indigo as the deepest base underpainting. This one I decided to try to, I mixed like a white that was, and added some indigo, and I created that as the base, and then did the indigo on top. So it's like kind of a different feel to it, but it's the opposite of what I normally do. And I've done a bunch of things. I've tried different colors and so forth as bases, but I always end up going back to the indigo because it just, for me, it works the best and it gives me the most flexibility when I'm looking to put colors on top.
Is this a good time to take a break, or?
Let me see, one other thing I wanted to do.
That's fine.
And then we could, let me just, I can finish that later, but one other thing I wanted to show. Okay. And again, it's with this. Add more wax. I want to make a thicker, tackier version. Take my smaller one. I have all different sizes. And by adding more wax, it creates a very, it's a thicker, and this, by the way, can be used to create trees as well. It creates great bark as a base. And, you know, if you're doing a bigger tree, it's amazing, because then when you put this down, and then you put another color, or a few other colors on top, and scrape away, you get this very interesting tree bark. Okay, so I'm just using this very light touch to kind of create a row of trees at the horizon line. Which I often do. So you see it kind of creates a, you know, which then I can go in and I can carve out what I want and leave what I want, and then one other thing I just wanted to do, I think. Alright, so now's a good time.
Okay.
I got a lot of things here. The artist is trying to say sometimes, it's very unique. And she has usually over like 50 to 60 artists represented and 250 pieces of art. So it's really an event. And there's an opening is April 5th, 5 to 7. It's a lot of fun. So take one of these cards if you want to check out Gallery Twist. And these are my cards, so if you would like to see my website and sign up for my daily list, that would be great. So, one other thing, I'm trying to figure out how to do this quickly because so important to me is color. And I tend to only use 3 primaries, a blue, a red, and a yellow. And then I use what I call mix-ins, which I use yellow ochre and indigo. And, of course, white. So this is just an example of, the 3 primaries and the mix-ins. And this is an array of colors that I mixed with only those colors. And the reason I love doing this, it's kind of meditative to me as well. I spend a lot of time usually when I'm starting to do work on some color in a piece, and I think about what is it I want to convey, which blue in the sky is, what time of day is it, just many different things go through my head when I'm mixing colors. And I think by keeping it very limited, the colors all speak to each other. They're harmonious. And it's not like taking a red out of a tube and a yellow out of a tube and putting it right on my painting, which to me is jarring. I don't like the look of that, and especially if I'm doing nature-based things. The colors found in nature aren't artificial. And that's where the yellow ochre and the indigo come in to kind of, they almost like dull them down, but yet then they create a family that work together. So,
Could you tell me what blue, red, and yellow you use?
sure. I typically use the French ultramarine. I like that one. I use Viridian a lot as well as in addition to a blue. I've tried all kinds of blues, but I always go back to this one. And I always use cadmium yellow. This is cadmium yellow pale, but again, it depends on, this is the cadmium yellow regular. The pale is just a little bit less dense and orange. And then I use a Scarlet Lake, which is a very vibrant, bright red. I also really like this brand. It's an Italian brand, Maniero Puro, and this is the saddle red, and that's a really nice red too. So, I play around with different combinations and see what I like. But I tend to go back to this. I just bought 3 new tubes of paint that I'm going to force myself to use because I get stuck on these just to try it, But, so, all right. So I'm going to do some layering on this piece. And this was the one that I said I had started with the off-white and then put indigo on top of it. I think I'm going to start with the green because I'm feeling like I want to define the green shade first. That's kind of what's calling to me. So I will, and I like to do it on this inside. Quite a bit of yellow. And oftentimes when I find a green that I like, I think in terms of 3 different values of that color, and I'll mix those on my palette just so that I have, a variety. So if I want a little darker green or a mid-tone or a lighter, I can see that the colors all work together. Okay, So that would probably be like a mid-tone. I want to do a lighter color. And I'm always evaluating as I'm mixing pools of color, you know, do I like that green next to that green? What does that green needs to shift. You know, it needs to be, I need more indigo in that, and more ochre. Make them work together better. And then I'm going to
Did you put wax in with those colors?
I will. I do. I put wax in every color, basically. Except for towards the end, if I have like a really small amount of color that I'm looking to do, knowing that it'll just seep into the wax that's already there, and that's too dull, I think, or yellow.
Did you put wax on the base of that painting first?
Yes, there's a lot of, oh no, you mean as just a coat? No, I just went right into it.
Okay.
And usually I do go right into it, but on the wood boards, I forget how porous the wood is. Like, it doesn't matter, I could go straight on a canvas and be able to do like white lines basically, but on the wood, it just like,
Sure.
it's like a sponge. So that's why that was a little disappointing to me that I forget you really should do that on the wood. Okay, so I won't get too fussy, but so basically, you know, I've just kind of created 3 greens that I like to work on. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this. So I'm going to add some wax into each of these just so that I'm done with that. And I can just start picking.
Does the wax affect your color when it dries? Will it dry true to what you see right now?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you put the wax in, it does appear to lighten it, but then when it dries, it does go back to being true to the color, yes. Okay. All right, so I'm going to see if I can do this so you can see. I mean, normally I would have it like right in front of me, but. I just realized I can't see with this. Now that I'm getting more detailed, I have to wear my detailed glasses. Now, you see, like, I put this on, and now I'm going to add some pressure. And it creates textures. And I decide how much, you know, texture I want to show, how much pressure I want to put on there. I get a little lost in the textures. It's like, it's so much fun to do this. You know, just making, again, it's that negative, positive, you know, defining certain shapes. You know, I'm leaving a lot of what happens underneath, but I will probably, you know, as time goes on, I will cover up certain areas with more color so that there's a little relief. But so Sketch just added this green, and now in here, I see another little plant emerging, so I'll probably keep that and add that in. This here was meant to be a shadow of the bird in my mind when I first did the, so I'm probably going to do that next. This I see like here now.
Do you ever use brushes at all, or use paddles and actual full time?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, sometimes like when I get to the end stages and I want a little tiny little something or other, I'll take a brush out. But I just really, I really like working with the palette knives. I find I get a little too fussy in my mind when I use a brush. I try to be too detailed, and I like kind of the organic nature of just creating lines and shapes. So this is where I probably would, I thought I grabbed a brush. Take the brush. anybody has any questions, feel free.
I mean, that's, where do you buy your wax and paints or with your site?
Well, everything's online these days, yeah. So I have like, I like Jerry's Artorama and Dick Blick. They're both good. You can get most anything. It's like, you know, you can't really like go into a store anymore. You can browse, you have to like know what you want. Everything's online, which, you know, has its positives but negatives as well.
Where do you get your prints done?
Well, I have a local supplier who does my photographing of my artwork and does some limited edition prints, which I have in my studio. My website, I have it set up through Art Storefronts, and they have a supplier in San Francisco that will print on demand and ship. So it's all kind of automated on my website. So, and the quality is quite good. I've gotten a lot of samples, and they can be printed on, you know, paper and canvas, metal prints, which actually come out quite nice. So they have, if you check out the website, there's a lot of different options of how you can have your image sent to you.
Are you still doing work with hot wax?
No, no, I don't do that. You know, it's sort of like, kind of have to pick and choose, I think, as an artist. It's like there's so many things I would be interested in, but I have to focus on something. Otherwise, I would be like all over the place. Because there's so many wonderful, I mean, I used to do gouache painting. I loved gouache. That's like highly pigmented watercolor. I liked that a lot. And I've done Japanese woodblock printing, carving. I did that. So many avenues to go to. So I think I might just do a quick sky situation, because I have blue left here. I know we're kind of running out of time, but,
So after you put the sky in, you have everything color. You wait till the next day, then add more color on top of that, I assume?
exactly, yeah. Because
Because you mentioned layers before, so you do.
a lot of different layers, you know, and again, that's where like the picking and choosing as to what pattern I want to leave, what I want, you know, create a solid area where it's kind of just a beautiful color, or, you know, just that kind of detail of decision making. This is the stage where I just like put down the color blocks and start scraping away and seeing what's revealed, and then determining what will happen next. And it would never work like this. place to stop. I would like for you guys to be able to see close up the